Hi everybody, welcome to the dungeon. My name is Robin and today is Flameworking 102.81 dot masking the I-beam pattern. Today I wanted to focus on one of like a million different dot masked patterns. And this one is actually really simple when you break it all down and you see it from the very beginning. It's nothing more than a very simply placed row of dots, and then you just repeat and repeat and repeat. I hope that those of you who are working on your dot placement enjoy this one because it's easier than you think. And then what I really enjoy about this one also is using the transparent with the opaque for the dot masking. It's something that I don't do that often, but I think really worked well here. You'll have to tell me what you think. With that said, I hope you're all doing safe and well out there. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time in the dungeon. All right, let's get right into this one. I am going to start out with, this is a lavender blue, I believe. All right. It's one of the lavender opaques. I think it's just lavender opaque. I only got a small amount of this color just to test it out. I really like it. So it's just these two colors, the lavender and the purple or the violet dark. My favorite transparent purple. It's so dark and purpley. I love it. It's a great combination to do masking with a transparent and an opaque color. That's what I liked about this one because it gave it a bit of depth that you can't get from just using opaque colors together. Anyway, I started this whole one out by adding a whole bunch of little footprints next to each other. And then I am going to roll it out, making sure that the left side over there, or at least one side, is cool. So I can use the cool side as my guide to roll the hot side out with and make that nice and even. And then I can go ahead and work my edges a little bit more. And now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to coat the whole thing. Now that I have a nice barrel shaped bead, I'm going to coat the whole thing with the transparent color. And so this is going to be my base color. Whatever the base color is going to be the predominant color that you'll see with this masking technique. Just because the way the dots end up being placed. So I wanted the transparent color to be more predominant. So that's the color I start with, oddly enough. So I'm going to just finish. And when I'm doing this, I'm making sure that I overlap as I go. So I don't have any of the undercolor showing up at all. The only reason why I use that color underneath is because I needed to use some kind of color. I could have used white. That would have been fine. But either way, because it's a dark violet, it ends up looking black in the end, the background. So now that I have this on here, I am going to just roll out the top, color till it's nice and smooth. And then this time I thought I would try to pull in those edges as close as I could to the mandrel, just by gently heating and pulling with a tungsten pick. And in the long run, even though I thought I got like right there at the end, I still didn't get it all the way there. Anyway, I pull it in as much as I can, or as much as I feel comfortable, and then I will just smooth and roll out and finish that side, and then move on to the other side, just by heating up a little bit of the glass. And you can feel that glass moving over the under, that surface. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to go ahead and just smooth it out with a butter knife. And then at this point, I just need everything to look good, or look, the way I want it to, before I start adding all my dot patterns. I have a cat now, you guys. His name is Onyx. He was just on my lap, purring for a little bit while we started. I'll have to tell you about him. He's all black. Perfect for me. All right, so I'm just going to roll this out after I heat it up, smooth it out. And I want to get to my base shape so I can start adding this dot pattern. And the whole time I do this, the dot pattern, this I-beam pattern, it's the same on every row. That's what's kind of interesting about this, and what's nice about this is it's just a repetitive pattern cascading down both sides of your bead. So the most important part is getting this first row right where you want it. I felt real good about this one. The dots were just big enough and spaced far apart enough to where I had a nice row of dots here. And if, it's not like, if you get a ruler out, it's not precisely perfect, the spacing of these dots. But when I heat and press each dot down, you have a little wiggle room to kind of shift the dot closer or farther away, or up or down a little bit. And if you can do that before you start to heat it up, then you have a better chance of it being closer to where you want it to be. So then I'm just going to go into a full heat and melt all that in. And I do wait a second. I always like to wait a little bit to roll things out, because I'm only trying to roll down the surface. I'm not trying to heat the whole bead up here. I'm only working on the surface of it. So you want to learn how to control the heat of your bead at all times, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so now here's where the I-beam starts. This is the I-beam pattern. So with my violet, I'm going to add the same size dots in between the previous dots. And then I'm going to melt those in. And for me, if I can get that first and second row of dots here nicely spaced out, then I feel like the rest of the pattern, I have a better chance of making a successful piece. Things just are easier when that first row of dots is perfect, or as close to perfect as you can get. Although it took me a couple attempts with different colors and really thinking about where I was placing the dots. Took me a couple attempts to get to this one. So now I'm working with a much smaller, this is like a cane that I pulled from the lavender, a nice thick stringer. And that's going to allow me to add smaller dots, always trying to make them the same size every time. And I'm going to place them right in between where the black dot or that violet dot is. And I'm doing that on both sides. And now I'm just going to heat those up. If I feel like my dots are looking good and I like the placement of them, and for me, it's just heating one side and the other side, one side and the other side, until things start to really soften. And then right before they soften all the way, I can roll out just like the surface of the glass. And here is this is like our I-beam pattern coming to life here. And I also pulled a stringer of the violet. So you're going to want to pull stringers of both colors. And here's how I'm going to do this. I'm going to just place one dot on the edge of the lavender dot on each side. And then I'll place a dot on the other one. That was the easiest way for me to do this, instead of trying to add one big dot, hoping that I would land on both dots. You know what I mean? Like I did on the first row. It just is easier to mask it off with 2 dots instead of 1. So just work each dot separately. All right. And I'll go ahead and finish adding my dot to the other side of those dots. And heat those up. And here, you know, if you need to add a little bit or subtract a little bit of a dot, you can. It just, you know, just give yourself a little time to get those dots where you need them to be before you start heating everything up. And then, like I usually do, every time I heat something like this, it's always one side and the other side. It gives the glass a chance to kind of, you know, soak the heat in when you switch back and forth. I don't even really heat the center. My heat is focused on the sides. And then a nice easy roll on the top of this bead. And then hopefully we can add one more of these I-beam patterns at the very, very bottom. And these are, you know, each time you add your dots, they're a little bit smaller. One side and then the other side. And I'm just using, you know, the tip of just the edge of the flame to heat up those dots. And my bead is very close to where the stringer is, so it's a very quick to drop the dot and lift up into the flame. And while you lift up into the flame, you're already heating it up for the next dot to land. So it's something that you really, you know, it takes practice. Like everything, it all boils down to practice. But once I have those dots on there, I'm going to gently melt each side down. And then we can finish up with the same pattern. You know, it's the same pattern all the way, which I really think that it makes this whole bead, I feel like it makes it more achievable and easier when you see it done, that you can be like, okay, you know, what if you just start with the center pattern and you play with that? And then you can work into a bead that has, you know, the 3 rows, and then maybe work into something a little longer and more complex looking, like this one that has the 6 rows. So anytime I'm working with masking, you know, it all comes from the practice masking that I like to do, which is just simple black and white masking, just on a small bead. And that's where all these patterns usually come from, is from me just kind of exploring with black and white. But I thought this time it would be really cool, because I used to not do any masking in color. I used to only do masking in black and white. But I think that the color masking is really very interesting as well. There's obviously so much more you can do because you're working with color, and then thinking about opaque colors and transparent colors. Yeah, so this one I think is a doable one for most of you guys out there. Honestly, for all of you, you should be able to do this, at least the first couple rows. Okay, so now we are getting close to the end. I'm just adding the dot decoration, and these are just my tiny Swiss dots that I'm adding methodically. I'm making sure that I'm adding these right underneath the, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to make sure that I'm adding them right underneath the purple dots. And then I'm going to go ahead and add a few more. Actually, what I'm doing here is I'm adding a tiny dot on top of each I-beam. That's what I'm doing. I'm sorry, I confused myself a second ago. And that's what's going to make the I-beam shift into the X pattern that you see at the end. So it goes from an I to an X. I wasn't sure exactly, you know, I like to name things, and I wasn't sure exactly what to name this masking technique. But, I thought the I-beam worked out well because that's kind of where it all starts from this I-beam pattern. And once I have all the dots placed on the tips of each I-beam, back and forth on all parts, I'll heat everything up nice and evenly. And then before I move on, I want to make sure that it is the shape that I like. And now we can finish things off with the final Swiss dot decoration. So I'm using the lavender, and this is when I really think it starts to look like Victorian wallpaper. I'm going to add these little tiny Swiss dots in the center of each dark space, each violet dot. But now it's not a dot anymore. It's more like it almost kind of looks like a flower. I just think this is such a great masking technique here because it's really easier than you think. It's not as hard as it looks, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Anyway, we are almost done here. I do want to add a few more little Swiss dots on top of some of these just to kind of diffuse them a little bit on the two outer rows here. So I'm going to just add a little bit of the violet on top. And that'll be it. All I'm going to do to finish this off is give everything a nice, gentle reheat. I do want to make sure that it is textured, though. I'm not going to melt any of these dots in. I just want to keep everything nice and bumpy. But I also want to make sure that they're all halfway melted in so they don't fall off later on. And that is it for our I-beam demonstration here with the masking technique. I love this. Let me know what you think, and I hope to see you all next time in the dungeon.